Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to CWU Live. My name is Chris Webb, Head of Communications at the CWU. Delighted, as always, today to be joined by our General Secretary, Dave Ward, and our Deputy General Secretary, Terry Pullinger. Good afternoon, guys.
Afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. So we wanted to come on and do the session live. It's not going to be a long session. It's an update, really, from Dave and Terry. There's been a development. The talks have been going on with Royal Mail Group across a range of subjects, and there's been a development on those talks, and the union has decided to take a new position. So we're going to receive that update from Dave and Terry, and then effectively, obviously we're talking about the change situation here. Your job is to spend the rest of this week and the beginning of next week getting the vote out to make sure we get that ballot over the line. So without any further ado, by the way, let us know where you're watching from. Let us know how long you've been a member of the union. I'll get them up on screen. Whilst you do that, Dave, just to open the session.
Yeah, hi to all our members and reps who are watching. We just want to update you on some developments. So, first of all, following a report from Terry and the negotiating team to the executive this morning, it's quite clear that the talks are not going anywhere. That's down to Royal Mail's actions. It's impossible to have productive negotiations while the company are continuing to take and threaten other various ways of introducing executive action. So, it's not on. Equally, I think we're of the view now that the two people who are outside the room all the time, the chair of the company and the CEO, are probably putting the people in the room in a straitjacket. So there's no movement on anything because they can veto it from outside the room. So last night, the talks were suspended, and we will now be calling for a summit meeting with the chair and the CEO to see if there's a way through any of this. It's unacceptable what they're doing. I do want to be clear on this point, though, and we'll be making this absolutely crystal clear to the company. The strikes that we've notified on pay will go ahead as planned. The only reason, if anything materialises in the next week or so, that would change is if the company makes substantial concessions on pay to the union, and that becomes clear. There will be no other reason why we would want to move away from this now. So, the message is we will up the ante in terms of escalating the talks. These guys were signatories, as me and Terry were, to the previous agreement. So we'll deal with that. But in the meantime, it's really important that you keep on working on the second ballot, get the yes vote out on that, and also that we make sure that we're planning for that strike in a week or so's time.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic. Terry, over to you for your overview.
Well, just to second really what Dave's saying now is there needs to be some sort of dynamic, a significant move to try and shift these negotiations forward. And we played that card, obviously, and I believe rightly so. It's very true that the negotiators in the room seem to have no remit at all to be able to expand or elaborate or negotiate an agreed settlement. What the point I want to make is this, right? I'm pretty sure, because our members are victims at the moment of massive propaganda. I've seen some of the stuff the company put out yesterday, about they've tried to have talks and the union won't talk, and there's 5.5% of money on the table, which there isn't. That's a complete lie. And I'd want them to come on and prove to you why there isn't 5.5% on the table this year. We know because we've dragged it out of them in the talks, and it's just a false position. But when they're saying that they're probably going to say the union's pulled out of talks and all that sort of stuff, won't negotiate on your behalf. It's simply not true. And I want all our members to know and all our reps to know that our narrative on this, our journey on this since January is extremely strong. We pushed the company in January to have a meeting on taking the pathway to change agreement forward on the pipeline, etc. They didn't want it. They tried to cancel it, but we forced the issue. They were busy at that time, rearranging their managers, sacking managers, bringing managers in, etc. We wrote to them in February. Everybody knows we wrote to them separately about pay because we knew the cost of living crisis was coming up, seeking a meeting, seeking an offer. But we also, at the same time, wrote to them about a pathway of change and moving it forward. and specifically on revision activity this year, on productivity and other aspects of the Pathway to Change agreement. The union then had its own policy forum in March, great expense to the union to determine our policies of taking forward that agreement, still honouring the agreement. We never heard from the employer until April. So anyone listening here, 4 months were wasted. And since we've entered those talks, management have disrespected and they've undermined these negotiations. Forget what you're hearing from anybody else, the CEO, this workplace stuff that's pumped out. While we've been in the talks, the officers, and it's been extremely frustrating, and EC members that have been in there, you know, there's stuff been put out on workplace before it's even been discussed at the meeting or put on the tables at the meeting. Twice we've had joint statements to say this is how we should conduct ourselves in these meetings and what should and shouldn't happen either inside or outside the room. And twice those joint statements have been undermined on day one by the company taking executive action. So this is not the behaviour of a company who wants an agreement. So anyone asks you, anyone, this union has been pushing since January for proper talks of how we move forward the Pathway to Change agreement. And we've reached a point now where clearly there's no movement in the room. There's no more exploring to do. We've tested them on everything. And it's quite evident that there's people not in the room, as Dave said, that basically got a chokehold on these negotiators. So our only option, and it was always something that we could play, and I think it's absolutely appropriate that it's now, is to get the chairman and the CEO, who've had plenty to say in the media, plenty to say at the shareholder AGM. They've had plenty to say about where we are. Well, let's get them in a room, and Dave and I, eyeball to eyeball with them, and just say exactly where they're coming from and who's calling the shots here, and whether we're going to genuinely negotiate an agreement, whether they are genuinely going to make an improved offer on pay. Because in the talks of the last few weeks, we've been dealing with, we've had with simultaneously meetings on pay, meetings on the changes, meeting on pay, and there's been absolutely no movement whatsoever. So in an effort to try and avoid what will absolutely be a war between us, because there's no doubt about it, we will be taking industrial action. We will defend ourselves, our members. They're making that clear. We'll have the second ballot result next week, and we're both convinced that's going to be another massive yes vote. They're either going to completely ignore their workforce and the trade union that represent them, or they're going to get these talks back in shape, back in a position where we can truly negotiate the right agreement for you on pay, and also the right agreement on how we take forward the Pathway to Change. So we've called this summit meeting. We've suspended talks till we have that meeting. We've not walked away from talks, but we've done it in the interest of adult behaviour and getting a proper set of negotiations going. That's where we are, Chris.
Thank you, Terry. So, you know, you couldn't be more clear there from Dave and from Terry. You know exactly where we are, and we also know exactly what we've got to do. We've got two very distinct disputes going on pay. We now need to prepare for the picket lines. On change, we now need to get every single vote back. There's almost a week still to go, so speak to your colleagues. People are coming back off holiday now. There are still thousands of votes out there to be won. Let's make sure we deliver as big, if not a bigger result than the previous ballot. So I think you've all got all the information you need. Outstanding to see 1,000 of you online at such short notice. We just gone online, which is absolutely brilliant. And take it all easy, and we'll be in touch soon, everyone.